I feel great about where Joe Burrow is going into the 2024 season. All right, it is the Breer Report for Friday, August 23rd. Training camps are, for the most part, done. We're going into the last full weekend of preseason games. The cutdown is next week, which means you will hear some names out there on the trade market, as happens every year. We've had some bigger names in the past get moved. Laramie Tunsil was one a few years ago. I'm going from Miami to Houston. I don't anticipate any sort of massive trade involving one of these guys this weekend. But there have been some notable names that have floated around. The biggest one being Jahan Dotson, who was traded yesterday from Washington to Philadelphia. Rare in division trade. Dotson goes with a fifth round pick to the Eagles for a third round pick and two seventh round picks. So we'll dive into the Breer Report for this Friday morning. And our first topic involves the two-time defending world champion Kansas City Chiefs. Yesterday, they signed Creed Humphrey to a 4-year, $72 million deal. Now, you'll remember Creed Humphrey was a part of the complete reimagination of the Chiefs' offensive line after their loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl after the 2020 season. And he was also part of the beginning of a little bit of a hot streak in drafting for their general manager, Brett Veach. And that set the stage for them to win consecutive Super Bowls and do it even though this most current run between the Super Bowl after the 22 season, the Super Bowl after the 23 season happened immediately after they dealt off Tyreek Hill. And if you look at how they made up for that, how they've made this work, really so much of it is about how they've drafted. And again, Creed Humphrey was part of that. He's the first guy in this group to be extended, but there are other guys who are worthy of extensions. Trey Smith, another guy on that offensive line who was drafted with Creed Humphrey in 2021. Great story coming back from the blood clots in college. Certainly one of the better guards in all of the NFL and a bedrock for the Chiefs on the offensive line. Nick Bolton was in that draft class as well. And then in 2022, you had Trent McDuffie, you had George Karlaftis, you had Leo Chanel, you had Isaiah Pacheco. You look up and down 21, 22, 23. They've drafted really well, which is great because right now they've got the great majority of those guys, of course, with the exception of Humphrey now on rookie contracts. But it also underscores the challenge that's ahead for the Chiefs, where they're going to have to decide which of these players to extend, which of these players to let go. They're not going to be able to keep everybody. And the reality is, having a quarterback making what Patrick Mahomes is making, you're going to have to continue to draft well to establish a viable middle class. You can't go out and spend 5, 6, 7, $8 million a year on your second guard or a complimentary defensive tackle or maybe your second safety. You have to be able to draft to fill all of those spots. The Chiefs have done that successfully over the last few years. Now, some of those guys have played well enough to get contracts. I don't think this will be the last one the Chiefs hand out, but they're not going to be able to pay all of these guys. So again, some of those names: Trey Smith, does he get a contract? Nick Bolton, does he get a contract? And then next year, the 22 class will be eligible. Trent McDuffie, now all-pro corner, you'd certainly think that he would get a contract, but he isn't eligible till next year. George Karlaftis, same thing. Leo Chanel looks like a really good linebacker for them. Is he more of a long-term answer? Is Nick Bolton the long-term answer at that position? Isaiah Pacheco, do you actually invest in a running back? He's been important to them the last couple of years. These are the sorts of decisions that determine what the Chiefs are going to look like around Patrick Mahomes for the foreseeable future. And we have the answer on the first of those, that being Creed Humphrey again, signing a 4-year, $72 million contract. Second topic for today: Joe Burrow, the Bengals quarterback, for my money, when he's right, maybe the second best quarterback in all of football. If you ask me who I'm taking at quarterback for the next 10 years, I'd say Mahomes first, but Joe Burrow would be number two. He's had a rough offseason again, and again, he's had an offseason where he's not been at full strength. He's never had a full-on NFL offseason. He came into the league, of course, in 2020 under the COVID restrictions. In 2021, he's coming off the torn ACL. In 2022, he had appendicitis that cost him a lot of training camp. In 2023, last year, it was the calf injury, and this year he's coming off the wrist. And this one's a little different than the other ones. This one is involving his moneymaker. And quarterbacks, understandably so, these are the things that make them nervous. And we've seen it, of late. Matthew Stafford had an elbow injury. He had the thumb injury last year. He told me at training camp this year that he thought when he hurt his thumb last year against Dallas that his career was over. Obviously, it didn't wind up being that way, but it gives you an idea of how sensitive these things are for these guys. Brock Purdy went through the elbow injury. Josh Allen had an elbow injury that he had to manage. These are tough things on guys, and it's been a tough offseason on Joe Burrow coming back from it. But they've been disciplined and they've managed him. And there was some inconsistency in the spring, and there were some ups and some downs, and they had to be very resolute about the way that they were getting him back to full health. But a great sign this week, and I know this flew a little under the radar, but a great sign this week in that they felt like he practiced well enough this week, both in their team practices and in their joint practice against the Colts, where they didn't have to push him out there in the preseason game. He wanted to play, but the coaches felt like he was in a good place going into the season, and there was no need to put him out there. And so I feel great about where Joe Burrow is going into the 2024 season. And this is, of course, a critical year for the Bengals franchise. Burrow got his contract last year. Jamar Chase likely gets his contract either in the next couple of weeks or in 2024. Or in 2025. He'll be on the team long term. Either way, as I see it. T. Higgins likely gone after this year. Trey Hendrickson's asking for a raise. You see this iteration of the Bengals that went to the Super Bowl after the 2021 season, that went to the AFC Championship after the 2022 season. Last year competed for the playoffs, even with Joe Burrow out. Jake Browning played really well in his stead. You see this window for not the Bengals, because I think as long as Joe Burrow is there, the championship window is going to be open for the Bengals. But you see the window for this particular group of Bengals starting to close a little bit. And one of the reasons why they decided to bring back T. Higgins on the franchise tag rather than trade him was because they felt like this is the sort of year where they have to have all hands on deck. And so I think where Joe Burrow is right now is a great sign for where the Bengals are going into the year. They need to get the Chase situation resolved. They need to get the Trey Hendrickson situation resolved. Amarius Mims going down and dodging a bullet that could have been a worse injury than it was. You hope you get him back. He was going to be their starting right tackle, and he's turned a lot of heads in camp. This is a Bengals team that I think very much will be a Super Bowl contender. And I felt this way a couple weeks ago. I feel even stronger about it now. I think Joe Burrow is going to be in the mix for big time postseason honors. Finally, topic number 3, because we are closing in on the beginning of the season and we have just 2 weeks until kickoff. For a lot of teams, this is contract time. And so we're going to get to the receivers here in a second, but there are a lot of guys out there who've been very good players over the course of the last few years that could wind up getting contracts. The first rounders from 2021, Chase, of course, is one of them. We'll get to him in a second. But guys like Patrick Surtain, Micah Parsons, Rashawn Slater, like this is the chance for their teams to get ahead of things a little bit and try to take care of them a year ahead of when they have to, because of course those teams have the 5th-year option on those guys. Do you take care of them now when you can manage the money a little bit better, when you're avoiding the inflation of an extra year? I think there will at least be an effort to get some of those guys taken care of. Whether or not it happens, I think is unpredictable, but could have some guys taken care of. And then there are guys who are drafted outside of the first round that maybe teams make a play for, right? So one good example of a team of a player a team could get ahead of is Malcolm Kuntz, who has developed through the Raiders system. You may not have heard that name. Played really well towards the end of last year, especially after Antonio Pierce took over. Could the Raiders go to Malcolm Kuntz and try to get him on a discount now and do the sort of deal that's going to help them later? If he has the sort of year that they think he's going to have playing opposite Max Crosby, his price tag could go through the roof. They might have to franchise him. So do you feel confident enough if you're the Raiders in how he's going to perform that you make a play to keep somebody like that on an affordable contract now. Again, 3 years in the bank, wasn't a first round pick, so you don't have the fifth year option on him. Those are some of those sorts of situations. The Malcolm Kuntz like situations are ones that could develop over the next couple of weeks as well. And then that, of course, then we have the big box contract situations and the three receivers that we've been following all offseason: Brandon Ayuk, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase. If I had to plant my flag on these situations right now, I would say CeeDee Lamb gets done right before the season starts. The Cowboys have shown a willingness to go over $30 million a year. That doesn't mean it's going to get done, but it does mean that they look at him as a true franchise receiver, which they should after he had 1,700 yards last year and not a lot around him to take coverage away from him. So this guy is a guy who's performed as a true number one receiver. I would expect that he gets done. I think his deal getting done sets the stage for something to happen with Chase. Whether or not it gets done again can be unpredictable. But if he gets close to or matches what Justin Jefferson got, then the market is established. That's the market for receivers of that ilk. Chase is certainly in that group. I actually think if he gets close to what Jefferson got, it simplifies things with Chase a little bit. At that point, the Bengals almost have to say, okay, this is what the market is. This Justin Jefferson was not an outlier. Let's go take care of Jamar Chase now. I think Ayuk might get done before that. I think the fact that things have gotten quiet around Brandon Ayuk is a good sign for where things are. I don't think this was ever about the Niners undervaluing Ayuk as a player. They love him as a player. And if you look at what's around Brock Purdy right now, who's the guy that you're looking at? This guy's going to be here 5 years from now. This guy's a number one receiver that he can grow with. Deebo Samuel's been beat up. Christian McCaffrey is older for a running back, not if he was a receiver, but for a running back, he's older. And George Kittle is in his 30s. So Ayuk is really the one that you look at and say, that's the guy that you can match with Brock Purdy long term. They, again, as we went over earlier in the week, put it on Ayuk, said, you can go find a better situation, go do it, see if the grass is really greener. Can you match the money in the football situation you have here? If you can, great. We'll work with you on that. We're guessing that it might not be out there for you. And New England, again, had two separate offers to him, both of them over $30 million per year. Football situation not nearly as good as San Francisco. He says no. Cleveland didn't love the idea of going there. They made a good offer as well. And then you have the Pittsburgh Steelers, where the Steelers weren't as willing to offer a current year player, which bogged down trade talks a little bit. And their money wasn't close. Their money wasn't really that far above where San Francisco's money was. So that pushes them back to the table. And the fact that things have gotten quiet tells me there's motivation now to get a job, to get a deal done, get Brandon Ayuk in. And again, like as I said with the Bengals, put the team in a position where in what should be an all-in year, they're in the best possible position to get over the hump after being in 4 NFC title games over the last 5 years and 2 Super Bowls to finally get over the hump. That's it for today's Breer Report. We'll talk to you guys next Tuesday.